out some old files, some old drawings that you probably don't have anymore. Perhaps you have them electronically, filed electronically. I'd still be impressed with the level of those drawings, penmanship.
I want you to know I saved, I've got probably half dozen drawings that I did by hand, because the whole art of hand drafting, makes me get a little goosebumpy here. I love doing it. It was not just the engineering, it was a presentation. Bud Johnson and Bob Voiland were structural engineers with Milo's firm, and that's how they got to know each other. Ultimately, though, they wound up setting up a firm up on the hill here in Boulder, Johnson Voiland. And I believe Arch was their first employee. Arch was a young grad out of CU. And it was the three of them that really made Johnson Voiland Archuleta what it was. Arch's name was added on shortly thereafter. They weren't always good times. It was pretty difficult. It wasn't the thriving economy we see today. And the story goes, at one point, Arch had to sell his Ford Bronco in order to meet payroll.
The principals, Bud and Bob, Johnson and Voiland, on the Archuleta later on, work harder than anybody. So you learned by, they showed you how, by leadership, by doing it themselves. And they were both such great draftsmen. I was working on this project, which was a school in southeast Denver, round school. So I got on the project, did this. Well, Bud Johnson was my mentor. He would encourage me and do this. And so I got my drawings done. This was probably 2 or 3 months down the line, and everybody thinks I'm pretty slow. And I turned them into him to review, and I was pretty slow and awkward. And he, my mentor, Bud Johnson, looked at it, took him in his office. They came back to me and says, well, you got quite a few problems here we'd like you to correct on your original drawings. In those days, pencil, and vellum paper. It was a bloody mess. The drawings, I could hardly remember what I'd drawn because he muched out. And I said, so here's what I did. I worked nights at home to improve it and improve it. And when I got done, finally, he was very pleased, pat me on the back. He says, I think we're gonna keep you. They give me a $100 a month raise. So that's the way life was with JVA. They were good. It was like working at home. I used low man on the totem pole. I had to make the coffee in the morning at about 9:30. Well, low man on the totem pole, and they were all particular about how they got it.
The first example of work, and I have a little brochure about it, Chautauqua Auditorium, which is an 1890s building, which had completely been neglected for decades. Bud and I were given that job by the city to restore the building. So we climbed the trusses and talked about it, and Bud said, there's one thing, after doing some calculations, there's not a thing in this building that meets the code. Well, we went back to the city and said it's going to take a big renovation, because this building is simply unstable, and Boulder's known for huge winds. And so the city said, well, we have to fix it. So we completely restructured the interior of the building and made it meet current codes. And that was Bud's job, leading us through this pretty complicated structural thing.
As they started to do more work, Dave Howdeshell joined the firm, and I believe that was 1971. Then Bob Hunnis joined the firm in 1973.
One of the nice things about JVA is you're never stuck doing one kind of building for very long. You've always got something else either in progress or in line, so that you don't always get stuck doing houses or doing steel buildings or doing precast buildings or doing post-tension buildings. You always got something else with more variety to keep life interesting. and you've always got someone to mentor. Bud and Bob especially mentored me when I came in with no experience and gave me enough experience that I could work independently, and then I've been able to pass that on to 2 or 3 more generations, some of which are in leadership here now. So I'm proud of that part. 2003, I left 8 years before I left. I gave up being an officer because we had invested in a branch office in Fort Collins, and they needed to have some kind of authority. And so I gave up being a vice president, which I had been for a long, long time, and so that there would be room for Chris Chop to become a vice president. And I don't know how they're organized today, but when you have a company of 15 or 20 people, it doesn't make sense to have everybody have a title, and I didn't need a title. My interests are on the other side anyway.
I came in June of '73, coming from Champaign, Illinois, with a Ryder truck with all our earthly possessions. The truck broke down before we could leave Champaign-Urbana, and I had to call Bob Boyland and say, Bob, I know I promised I'm going to be there in 2 days, but the truck's broken down. It's probably going to be 4 or 5 days. I detected a certain amount of skepticism in the tone of his voice, but he was gracious about it and said that would be okay and we'd work it out. What I didn't realize was that as Bob hung up the phone, and in those days everybody sat in the same drafting room, so Bob was sitting there with all the rest of the employees. Bob commented something to the effect that, well, I doubt if this guy is going to really work out. If he can't even get here for the first day of work, then there's probably not a lot of future for him here. So 35 years later, I left the firm. So the Beaumont Hotel project in Ouray was really intriguing because it had been abandoned for 20 years. The roof over the dining hall had collapsed. The critters had taken over the place. It was really in decrepit condition, but some very visionary owners bought the building at an auction and decided to restore it to its earlier grandeur from the early 1900s. We made numerous trips to that site and ended up restoring the whole building, including threading various pieces of structural steel through places that the contractor thought at first they couldn't do, but ended up being a feasible process. And now it has become one of the real economic engines for downtown Ouray, Colorado. So it's truly a luxury hotel in the midst of the historic mining district and historic area of Colorado. So that one was particularly noted because it won, I think, 5 national awards. One from the governor of Colorado, one from President and Laura Bush, and then 3 other things from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So,
in the middle 70s, a time when I was still in college, the times were tough, and they actually started a community garden for the firm at Bob Hunnis's property. And think about that. So people are growing crops to kind of help make ends meet, to put food on the table. It sounds astounding to hear about. That sounds worse than Arch selling his Bronco to me, personally. They were really led by 3 distinct personalities, and I think that's really been the beauty of JVA all along. And I think the 3 of them together worked really well. Truthfully, we've tried to take that all through the years and have a mix of personalities in our officer group. And I think that's led to our success and made the company is what it is today.
So this bridge that we're talking about building from the south side of Vail to cross I-70 to the other side was a real headache. And the problem is that the I-70 corridor is very busy even then. And these big trucks coming out, going across that highway, traveling east to west and vice versa. They didn't want to shut that highway down. What, to build a little pedestrian bridge, going to shut this multi-million-dollar, you would have had to call Eisenhower in Washington. And I said, well, I know what we could do. We'll do it with precast concrete elements. This is my idea. And then we'll post-tension them after the fact, but everything can be put up there. Then we'll tighten it, tie the strings afterwards, and it should work. And they said, no. So I talked to Bud Johnson about it, and he says, Arch, this is very delicate. I mean, what if something falls or breaks while they're putting it up there? I said, well, yeah, but they can use cranes that aren't interrupting the traffic. There'll be a crane in the center, there'll be a crane on the edge, and they'll cantilever out, and then the other side will pick it up, cantilever out, blah, blah, blah. And he says, but you're combining pre-tension concrete elements, and then you're going to post-tension them afterwards. It's never been done. It worked. At least it was beautiful. We got great photos, and hasn't fallen.
We are all very thankful that they set up a retirement plan, a stock bonus plan, an ESOP, as some folks might know it, that has allowed for ownership transition in the firm over these last number of years, over these last 60 years. It was interesting. Our client base was broad. We were very fortunate in the Boulder area to be working with the likes of NBBB, Tom Nixon, Jack Brokaw, Bill Bowen, and I believe it was Bill Brown. We still work with Jack Brokaw today, but we started doing a lot of K-12 work, education work, recreation center work, municipal work. We're working with Charles Hartling, who is a wonderful architect doing these incredible residences here in the Boulder area. And we worked with Chuck, and so we really developed a wide range of project types.
The project that we did up at Lake County, that was one of our larger projects at the time, and it was interesting. We did a large gym, and we had been doing, like I said, smaller projects. And I remember Arch calling and saying, Jack, we just did a couple trusses across the gym up here that are 20 feet deep. He said, and each truss cost more than any of the houses that we ever did together. So that was an interesting idea that he came up with. But sometimes the finger pointing with the other consultants kind of thing is just pain in the rear end, and life's too short for that kind of stuff. So they made life easy for me.
They're just such great people, each one of them. You know, Bud Johnson worked with me back in the 60s on some of Charles Hartling's houses. Charles was one of the best residential architects anywhere in the country, and he was here, did probably 60 or 80 residences. And we've done a lot of work together all these years, and we continue to work with Tom and all the guys at JVA in terms of projects all over Colorado and downtown Boulder and so on. So it's been a wonderful relationship, and they have such an important footprint in terms of what they've helped accomplish in Colorado, particularly Boulder.
Was coming out here skiing, saw JVA's ad in Engineering News Record, and interviewed and joined the firm in '79. Mark Cormier came from the East Coast, and he wanted to get out west. Mark applied at JVA, and he started work in our Arvada office, working under Bob Voiland in 1980. So Mark and I go back that far, I think, what, 37 and 36 years.
I've only worked at JVA in my professional life. So I started in 1980, right out of school, and here I am. So, and started as a design engineer. In fact, I found a letter from Bob Voiland. Bob Voiland is the one, the V in JVA, is the one who actually hired me. He's the one I corresponded with when I was in school. He said there was a structure to how the company is organized, but really anyone can talk to anyone. There's no chain of command in what we do. There's a design engineer, a brand new out of school design engineer can come talk to me. Doesn't have to go through someone else to talk. One of my roles is to be there for the staff, and I actually sit. I've chosen, even though I've been asked a number of times if I wanted to have an office, an actual, with a door that closes. I've actually chosen to not have an office, but to have a cubicle that's a little different. The walls are a little higher than the other cubicle areas around the company. But I purposely want to be there and accessible to the engineering staff.
The 80s and early 90s were really a tumultuous time. We went through multiple recessions, growing a little bit, not growing, just riding out these difficult times. But we still had a strong client base and doing a lot of work in K-12 and in the mountains and throughout the state. So we had a good group of folks we were working with.
JVA was involved with helping us replace Casey Middle School, and it was a very complex project. It was required by the city. They financially participated in the rebuild of this school to retain two walls of the historic building, the south and west walls. So it was a challenging engineering problem because we had to stabilize those two walls, demolish the rest of the building, and then rebuild it. And we not only rebuild it, we rebuild it to a LEED standard platinum, first public middle school in the country to achieve that designation. They're part of our community. They're heavily involved with impact on education. Their employees have children that go to school in our buildings, and so they're vested in Boulder Valley School District, and that shows in their commitment to their work, their dedication, their willingness to step forward, help wherever they're needed. I can tell you, I've called on JVA for favors to help us out on certain projects. They're not being paid for that, but they have their employees have children that go to that school, and they want to see those improvements made.
Bob Voiland was the last of the principals to leave. Bob left in 1986. At that time, Gary Howell and Dave Hadashell and Bob Hunnis were the officers in the firm. Bob had been made president when Bob Voiland retired in '86, and actually I was brought on then as a corporate secretary, so I became the fourth officer, the youngest of the group. Cindy Ward joined the firm in '86.
So I think what keeps me going at JVA after 30 years is knowing that we're a caring company. That's very important to me, that we treat all of our employees with respect, and that we're collaborative. There's a sense of teamwork here at JVA that we feel inspired by. I feel inspired by. I also like the innovative part of JVA with our technology software. I think that's important for especially the younger kids coming in to know that we're not back in the dark ages.
I think from about 92 to 99, there was a 7-year period where not a single person left JVA. We were really proud of that. I think that it speaks to the culture that was part of our origin, and a culture that we continued to nurture and expand on even today as a firm of 100 people. And then in '99, Kevin joined JVA. He was living close by. He joined JVA and set up our civil department, which has just been a boom to the company.
1998. It was late '98, probably around Thanksgiving time, that I started talking with Tom Sell about starting a couple of new services at JVA and the civil and environmental stuff. It was really exciting to kind of start this with JVA, and I think what was really enjoyable for me was talking to guys who cared so much about their company. I think Bob Hunnis and Dave Hadashell and Tom Sell were the three that we sat right here in this room and talked about the future. The key to our success is the repeat clients. You know, we work with one project with a town and we end up doing 40 projects with a town. It's just been a great ride to see some of these relationships last for 10 years and beyond. So that's really been a fun part of what we're doing.
The civil department grew as an outgrowth of that, of our civil engineering. Frankly, our environmental engineering sprang from that. Kevin had real strength in both. And we managed to bring on Charlie Hager to help with our civil department, Josh McGibbon to work with our environmental team. And so really you saw the makings then of the late 90s, early 2000s, the growth that led to the people that lead the firm today, myself and Cindy and Mark Cremier, Josh McGibbon, Kevin Tone, and Charlie Hager.
When Kevin and I began working together in 2001, I had an opportunity to work on a lot of site development work and really grow that site development group. At the same time, Kevin could also help grow the environmental water wastewater group. So it was really a match made in heaven. My favorite types of projects are working on schools, because again, to go to the ribbon cutting and to see all of the parents, the teachers, and then especially the kids enjoying what you've just put together over the last sometimes 2 or 3 years is very, very rewarding. So it's funny, I don't really have a favorite because they all have, and I think that's another unique thing about what we do. Every single project is different. The one positive thing that I really like about JVA and its people and its culture is that with the type of projects that we work on and with the clients we have, they really want to see best possible quality and the best possible service at a fair price.
At one point we worked for Roundup River Ranch, which was a Paul Newman children's camp. We provided a very innovative process called a multi-stage activated biological process so that they had an opportunity to discharge to wetlands with a zero discharge permit. Very innovative and rare type of process. I've always enjoyed working with JVA. They have a culture that breeds innovation and open-mindedness. They were one of the first companies to embrace hiring young female engineers, and they have the managerial courage to try new and innovative processes even if they're the first ones to do it. That takes a lot of confidence.
Something that in our environmental department that we really enjoy, I think, as a group, is that we take care of a lot of small communities. We fill a need that maybe a lot of other engineering firms don't. So small towns like Iliff or Grover or Gilcrest, or these towns of 90 people that most people in Colorado don't even know where they are, you know, we're their engineer. We've taken them from a small water plant or wastewater plant that didn't work very well and built them a new $1 million, $2 million state-of-the-art facility and helped them find the funding to get there. And that's something that I think people are proud of. Our engineers feel good about that. They can go home at night knowing that they've done good by the environment and by the people of Colorado, and they've served kind of an underserved group of people. And so we take those same values from within our company and how we treat others and take that to our clients. We've hired some really good people that like to work together, collaborate, and come up with some really neat solutions that are going to be best for the client, not necessarily what's best for us or what we want to do. It's really what's best for the client, and that goes far with our clients and makes for a good project.
Look at the product that you get from them. You know, that's, for me, that's why it's easy to work with them. Because they know what as far as I'm concerned, they know what an operator needs and what an operator requires to be successful, right? I mean, the whole idea is to protect the environment. And when you have a partner like JVA that's, you know, very ingrained into environmental issues and knowing what works and what doesn't work, you know, makes my job a lot easier. And that's how you tell whether an engineer's done a good job, you know, is how many change orders you have. And the projects that I've worked on with JVA and specifically Kevin, there's been less than 2%, other than if it was something that I wanted. You know what I mean? The specifications were very clear. Job came in under budget and on time.
We've had experience with JVA on both the structural side as well as the water wastewater side of projects. You know, my father is part of a family business. We've been around for a long time, so I know Tom and my father work together as well. The last few years, it's evolved more into a negotiated alternative method, and we've had real good success working as a team on CMAR projects, design build, and that whole aspect of the alternative method of delivery. We do not like change orders, and JVA, has got them on that same page with us as far as providing a good quality project in the end that everybody's happy. Your reputation's only as good as your last project.
In the middle 90s, we set up an office in Fort Collins because we realized there was a lot of work going on in the northern sector of the state. And frankly, if you really weren't up north, you were left out of that work. Bob had personal dealings up in the Grand County area, and we really saw some opportunity in opening up an office in Winter Park in that region. And we set up that office in, I believe it was about 2001 or so. In 2015, I believe it was, 2014, that we set up our office in Glenwood Springs. And that is now, we have structural and civil and environmental engineering in that office. Most of our clients are down in the Denver metro area. We realized it made a lot of sense to open up a Denver office. So Howard McHenry has run point on setting up an office in Denver. We're down in Ryder Square. Right now we have our civil and environmental team in that office. It's growing, and that's really allowed us to bring on folks in those two disciplines from the Denver market. Howard runs that office. Craig Kobe is leading the charge in our Winter Park office. Cooper Best runs the Glenwood Springs office, and then Brian Campbell oversees the office in Fort Collins. I can flat out say we've never had a stronger team. Technically, cohesively, it's really been neat to see what our three disciplines, how they've meshed together, feed on each other, and it's really enjoyable to see the interaction between our groups. It just makes JVA a better place to work.
Right now, I like working with all the young people that are coming into the company. I think it's been a real energy boost, and I feel like because my son is 26 that I can relate to a lot of this younger staff on a different level, and to me that's been a kick in the pants and makes life a little more fun around here.
In the 2 months I've been here, my favorite part about working here is that everyone is so approachable, especially like they were mentioning before, like Charlie and Tom and like Josh and Kevin. They're all very approachable people, even though they're like our upper echelon of management and whatnot. So it's nice to be able to communicate them and not be like sweating bullets or something like that.
I just like the atmosphere at JVA. It's everyone that I work with is friendly. They're easy to approach. They're easy to ask questions with. It's very easy to help them. If I see someone struggling, it's always easy to reach out to them because I know they'd also reach out to help me if I was struggling, and it's comforting to know that you work in an environment that's like that.
Yeah, that was the nicest thing actually starting work here is I didn't know anything, I feel like, so being able to ask questions and people pausing in their work and being like, yes, let me talk you through this, let me explain in detail what you need to get done, it was really nice. It made work go a lot faster during the day, and it was a lot more fun that way too.
Yeah.
I think the corporate values, it's just good morals to be that with the company. You should care about what you're producing, and it's, we had a small meeting yesterday with just the structural team about forecasting for the next couple months about how if some bond issues pass, we'll be having a lot more schools, and that we need to make sure that we're relying on each other because a lot of this work comes through that we need to really act as a team, and everyone nods their head in agreement.
I especially appreciate working with JVA because of their personable nature. I feel like they're very accessible and very collaborative, and that's refreshing in this business. Seems like I always use them on the trickiest projects. We do a lot of messy renovations for clients like the Front Range Community College and currently the Boulder History Museum, which are existing, complicated buildings. And you start getting into demolition, there are always surprises, and the JVA guys are always there to take a look with us and solve problems as those surprises emerge during construction.
They are mentors without parallel, in my opinion, in the entire Colorado professional consulting community. Architects, engineers, environmental consultants, they just encourage them to tackle meaty work from the early go. They don't give them menial tasks, they really get them involved in the true art and science of engineering. And so the end product of that is that those young engineers, by the time they're 2-3 years into their career, they are really strong team members. Oftentimes a senior engineer would go to a meeting with the architect, leave the junior engineer back in the office. Tom's firm doesn't happen, even though it may not always be allowed for within the fee structure. He brings, and his associate senior members of the firm bring their young engineers to the meeting, and it just has untold benefits to the project.
You know, the thing with JVA is I trust them. They're dependable, you know, they're the first people I call. When you're sick, you go to the doctor. When you need good structural and civil engineering, you go to JVA because they're that good and dependable. It's one of the most creative things that they ever did is when we were working on Denver School of the Arts in the auditorium. And part of the project was to renovate the existing auditorium, which was fairly large. And we were trying to make it more intimate. They had a balcony, but started talking about coming back in and bringing the balcony down a little further to make it more intimate. And so Mark was working in there and really came up with some great solutions on how to be able to extend that balcony, make the space more intimate, but yet structurally you wouldn't have known that a lot of that stuff was going on. And it really, especially in an existing building where you're dealing with existing things and you don't know what's underneath, it was really pretty cool.
That's okay.
Get your champagne.
We're Anderson Hallis, and we've been working with JVA for 25 wonderful years. And although we wanted to really kind of capture so much of that, we thought that we could boil it down to 3 topics. So starting with basements, attics, and crawl spaces.
Spelunking with
Spiders.
mold, snakes, and
Big ass.
tools. JVA seeks
Audacious.
Truth with
unrestrained,
Agile and
curious minds.
but never
never
expose them to
daring
heights.
Woo.
My wife has a friend in a church who's an older woman who asked her, because she knew her husband was an architect, if I would recommend a structural engineer to look at some minor problem in their house. And I scratched my head. This was in Boulder, and I thought, well, I'll just call Tom and ask if he could have one of his engineers solve the problem and meet with this lady, and certainly he paid for it. And what I found out later was that Tom took it upon himself to actually meet with the lady himself, and the lady was very happy and called me and thanked me. Tom didn't have to do that. It was time. It was his time, but he did it, and that's the way they are. If you need something done quickly, if you need advice about a structural issue, even if it's a project that they're not working on, they'll just drop everything and work with you. So you're always confident that if you call that office, that you're going to get a response and you're going to get someone who's very competent answering the question that you have. By the way, this is not bullshit. This is a very special professional service company, and there aren't many like JVA. They have all of the experience of a larger company, but they have the the response and the working relationships and the sensitivities of a small town physician.
Park Ricker Seacat specializes in community recreation centers all across the country, and with JVA we've also done a number of National Park Service projects, and they've been game enough to follow us wherever we go, no matter what the seismic territory or wind speed. I guess the witty story would be we've been working with Tom on a project recently for the National Park Service, and I was impressed that Tom himself came out to visit the job. It's a historic building. There's a little teeny hatch to get down to the crawl space. You don't know what lives in crawl spaces. And I'm thinking I'm not going down there, and of course Tom's in his jeans and his combat boots. He's got his flashlight, so he took the lead and went down there, found out what he needed to find out. I didn't have to go down. That was great. Thanks, Tom.
On to saving the day.
Suitcaseless in snowflakes and snowstorms.
Timberlocked rot.
Oops, no structure?
Faux follows function.
Varendeel truss.
Structure my home?
Who you gonna call?
JVA!
You know, beyond being personal, they're fun guys as well. You know, Tom Sells played on our Oz soccer team a few times, and it's been a lot of fun getting to know him through that.
You know, we've had so much fun together.
Well, I had always been very close to both Bud and Bob.
We had a very close-knit kind of thing that can only exist when you have a very small company.
Real estate investment, that's partly the balloons that I was chasing when I retired from JVA, but I was always sorry in retrospect. Not bitter, but sorry that I retired because I still loved JVA.
It's been really enjoyable to see what we do together and take some time together outside of the 8 to 5 firm time.
We like to socialize because I think we truly like each other, and there's a lot of fun people here.
In the early years, we also used to like to have a winter outing in February where we'd go as a company and trail ski from the top of Vale Pass across Shrine Pass down into Red Cliff and have lunch at the Mexican restaurant. And that was a family thing.
When you spend time outside of work, you get to meet people's wives or partners or significant others. You know who their kids are, and you've seen their kids grow up. I mean, my daughter was 1 year old when I started here at JVA, and so people have seen her and know her, and my son loves coming to the office, and it's just, it's very personal. They know your family, or they see your partner at the Christmas party, or they see your kids, and they understand why you need to get home and spend time with the family.
Being accommodating to people who work here to their needs for family and health, and trying to create a balance between work and life.
I mean, JVA's been really always very good about supporting when I had Brian, you know, maternity leave and working part-time, working less, so I could raise my young man. And I think that's been a tribute to JVA all along, that they're very supportive of families. And
we know them personally. They are our friends.
They are friends. You know, I feel like I've known them all my life.
They're just great people and great friends, so it's kind of like being part of family after all of these years working together.
Travel adventures.
Animating
Pilotless
Planes.
or 2 a.m.
road.
Trips with
coffee
Creamer.
spittoons.
into the eye of
Adventure they.
Daringly.
go.
Great.
Great.
Great people.
We love you guys. Congratulations on 60 great years.
Well done.
Looks really good for a guy celebrating his 60th work anniversary.
Yeah,
It's
you're
true,
right.
he
That's-
does.
yeah.
You must have done something right.